Okay, good night. I want to thank Kathy, my friend, for introducing me. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? And I want to thank AA and Printed Matter for inviting me to do the keynote. It's a real honor. And maybe at this point, I'd like to thank the people I work with, Badlands. Badlands Unlimited is the press I run, and I can't do it without the people I run it with. So that's Ian Chen, Michaela Durand, Matthew So, who's not here working at his other job. We also have some Badlands authors here. Petra Courtwright is here. Where's Petra? Petra's right there. Travis Smalley's here. Travis is right there. Are there any other artists from How to Download a Boyfriend who's here? Well, who? Josh Klein is here. So I want to thank the authors who's published with Badlands. Okay, let's start. I want to dedicate tonight to Chris Marker. I'd like to start with this. A lot of artists, great artists, died this year. Mike Kelly, who's in the Art Book Fair, Franz Vest. But Chris was the one I was closest to. He was a friend and a fellow traveler, and he died this June. I learned a lot from Chris, and consider him one of the North Stars for the people who work in media. And so I just want to dedicate tonight to him, and to also make a connection between what I do with Badlands and publishing with what he does in film, video, and other media. He was really one of the pioneers of making many different sorts of media, from film, video, to Second Life. Who works in Second Life? And Photoshop. I mean, he was 91. He was still making weirdo Photoshop images and sending them out. I find it completely interesting and inspiring. Chris also lived up to the only adjective that I think all artists want to be associated with, which is unclassifiable. And so I want to dedicate tonight to Chris. I'm going to talk to you about books and publishing. But before I talk to you about my experience, my very scant experience in books and publishing, I'm going to tell you a little backstory. This is essentially a story about how I started publishing and what I've learned in the process of publishing. I'm going to start in 2000 to 2008. I essentially did work. I worked. And it was important. I loved it. I'm an artist. I want to make work. I want to do exhibitions. I want to do shows. I want to get my work out there. And so that's what I did from essentially 2000 to 2008. I had what I called the plague of exhibitionism. I would essentially take whatever comes my way. I mean, that's how we survive, essentially. It's what we make do with. Whatever comes, you try to say yes to and try to make the best of it. And I had a great time doing it. I was completely exhausted, but it was wonderful. I showed many different works, from video to installations to whatever, and I'm quite proud of most of them. But around the end of 2008, I was done. I was tired, and frankly, I had no more ideas. Sometimes you just run out of ideas. Sometimes all your ideas just run out of you. And I had nothing left. I did a project on the Marquis de Sade, and he just fucking ruined me. I couldn't look at porn. I didn't want to think about sex. I didn't want to look at lights or video. I didn't want to look at anything. I was done. And so at the end of 2008, I thought, well, fuck it. I'm just not going to do anything. And so I said I was done. At the end of 2008, I stopped taking opportunities to show work. I stopped taking opportunities to make new work. And I had some money saved up. I know how much I need to live. I don't live on much. And so I thought, well, screw it. I'm just going to do odd jobs and not do anything. So at the end of 2008, I stopped. These diagrams, by the way, I didn't make. PowerPoint has these things called smart art diagrams, so you can automatically make diagrams. And so all those diagrams are sort of pre-programmed into PowerPoint. But I don't know how to make the diagrams into any other color besides black and purple. So I just want to warn you that all the diagrams are going to be black or purple. So I think some examples in my mind of people who thought about not working. I don't know if I was thinking them, I think I thought of them in hindsight. I didn't think of them at the time. In 2008, I just didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to clean my studio floor. I didn't want to do anything. But of course, other people in the shared history of contemporary art and other forms of culture have done not working. And of course, one of them is Marcel Duchamp, who famously retired from art after the 1920s. He, of course, was lying, but we don't count that against him. But he really made a point of just saying, fuck it, I'm done. I'm just done. And he did for 30, 40 years. He just stopped showing. Of course, there's a larger cultural context of being on strike, which is another form of not working, which I think many of us know of now, especially in Greece. Anyone from Greece? Yeah. What's going on in your country, man? What? Yeah, I know. They're screwing with your country. Anyways, we've seen the strikes. I like the troll picture because it looks a little like Duchamp, so I threw it in there. They have the same sort of lean back. But the one I'm sort of emotionally closest to is Yvonne's form of not working. Because Yvonne, as you may or may not know, was a legendary choreographer and dancer. She was part of the co-founding of the Judson Dance Project. And she was a great dancer for 10, 12 years. And then in the 70s, she just stopped dancing. She was done. She didn't want to do it anymore. And so she said, forget it, I'm done with dance. But she didn't stop working. She started making films and went on to have an incredible career doing feature films and short films and experimental films. And I found real solace in that, in looking into Yvonne's history. And she's also a friend, and so she was telling me about the experiences she has, sort of changing gears. She needed a change in her life, and she thought she wasn't going to do dance anymore. She quit the thing that she was most known for, most famous for, put her life in, and decided to do something else. And I thought it was nice as a change. I want to talk about one more example that's close to my heart about not working and changing, because it's from one of the people that gives me, what does he give me? I don't know, helps me wake up in a day. It's Samuel Beckett. I think everyone more or less knows his most famous play, Waiting for Godot. But I don't know if many people know that he wrote it as a form of vacation. See, he was working in the 50s, in the 40s, he was writing his masterpieces, the trilogy, which is Malone, Malloy, Malone Dies, and The Unnameable. 3 large novels that he was writing as his masterpiece. But of course, with all masterpieces, you get sick of doing them because it takes so long. And so after the first or after the second novel, he just couldn't do it anymore. And he decided he can't do it. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. He took a break. But what he ends up writing is Waiting for Godot. And so Godot, it becomes his vacation from his actual work. And ironically, becomes the thing that he's most known for. People know him for the trilogy, but people mostly know him for his playwriting, and mostly for Godot. And I think it's interesting that the mindset changed from working to not working, and from not working to producing a new form. In a sense, a new value. So this was the question for me. What is made when one does not work? I don't know. 2008. I don't know. 2009. I cleaned my floors. I checked email. I did odd jobs doing design. I don't know. 2010. I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't care. But it was around 2010 that I think something sort of piqued my interest. Okay, I like this slide a lot. 2 things actually piqued my interest, mostly. It was the advent of, this sounds so nerdy, I hate saying this, the advent of the e-reader, iPad and the Kindle. It was in 2009, 2008, 2009, 2010. People were, Apple and Amazon, other companies are starting to sell these e-readers where you can download books. And so you can buy what's called e-books, right? Files that you can download onto these devices that you can read. Now, it's important to know, to me, that e-book as a file format has been around. It's been around since 1999, 2000, right? But it wasn't until these physical devices allowed you to download these files and to read as if you're holding a book, as opposed to reading it on a laptop, that they took off. So I think this is an interesting thing that I thought about. It's the physical act of reading, that it wasn't until the device mimicked the feel and portability of a book that people actually started reading these files as if they were books. Before these e-readers, they were reading them off of laptops just fine. But it wasn't until these devices, this mimicking of the physicalness of a book, that they sort of took off. So I thought that was really interesting. And I had always wanted to run a press, but I frankly didn't have the money. I didn't have $5,000, $10,000 to spend printing 1,000 copies that no one is going to buy. It's going to sit in my studio warehouse. With the advent of ebooks, maybe I can just program the book and then get it out there, and I wouldn't have the overhead. I wouldn't have to spend the money. I'm cheap. I don't want to spend the money printing it. But the other interesting thing in 2010 was I read these great books about books, and mostly about publishing. One in particular, which I feel like I'm selling the book, and I should send him an invoice every time I talk about publishing. It's the book by Andrew Pettigrew. I don't know if anyone's know it, but it's called The Book in the Renaissance. Does anyone know this book? It's put out by Cambridge. It's a history of book publishing, and I thought it was completely fascinating. And it's through this book and other books on the history of publishing that I realized that gave me the impetus to start my press, Badlands Unlimited, to do ebooks. Because I found so many similarities between what was happening now and what was happening at the time of Gutenberg. I started Badlands in 2010. The idea was, I'm sorry, there's this tiny, I can't see what's up there, so I got to turn around. I wanted to publish experimental and artist ebooks. Sorry, I can't see this thing. I wanted to publish artist books and writings about art. I wanted to play with production time. And what I mean by that is I wanted to know, because I don't have any experience in publishing. I don't know a thing about publishing. I know how to make things. And I know making things sometimes take a day, sometimes takes an hour, sometimes takes a year, sometimes takes 5 years. And so I thought, why can't I apply that to publishing? So I wanted to know whether within ebooks or paper books I can make a book in an hour or a month or a year or 5 years, to play with production times and to see how that relates to what is being made. And I came up with a motto. We wanted to make books in an expanded field, which I thought was the way to describe what we were trying to do. And I think for me, the expanded field, it connects to two things, the form and the history. The form seems sort of self-explanatory to me. I wanted to make different kinds of ebooks that have different forms. Some you can read, some you can experience, some are interactive, something free, something expressive, like artist books, like all the things that you see here at the Artist Book Fair. Part of the pleasure of being here, of being not only an exhibitor, but as a customer, is to see the 1,000 flowers blooming and what a book can be, right? From the limited edition of 1 to the limited edition of 10 to posters to print out Xeroxes to zines to hardcover books. I think that's what is so pleasurable about seeing and experiencing the Art Book Fair. That's what draws me here every year, not only as a paying customer, but now as an exhibitor. You want to see the multiplicity of that form. And I wanted to do that digitally through ebooks and possibly paper books if I had the money. But with the history, I think it's also, history is what I'm going to talk about a little more. And I'm going to talk about it in terms of recent history and expanded history. Because recent history is that, I didn't work in a vacuum. Many artists have started doing publishing, and they've done great publishing projects. And I just want to point out 3 that I know of that I respected, that I think gave me energy to start Badlands. One of them was continuous projects, which was Wade Guyton, Joseph Logan, Bettina Funke, and Seth Price. They did great publications in around the 2000s, experimental magazines, basically. I thought they were great. Primary Information is another one. Last year, they put out an incredible book on Mike Kelly's old punk band, Destroy All Monsters. It's a beautiful book, run by Miriam Katz and James Hoff, Primary Information. Incredible. Just two people trying to publish interesting stuff. And the last one is Josh Smith's now defunct 38th Street Publishers. Josh Smith was a painter who wanted to make affordable artist books, and they were insane, but they were beautiful. And I think it was within this ferment of people making stuff in New York, doing publishing work, imagining new production models for what it means to make a book, that got me thinking that maybe I could do it too. But I think I wanted to make paper books, but I wasn't as interested. I was thinking about the ebook stuff because I'm a media person. I make files, essentially. So the file can exist in other forms. And so what if those files didn't end up on a page, but ended up on an ebook file, on an EPUB file? But that's not the only history I was thinking of. I think I was thinking also of this book, The Book in the Renaissance. And it's completely fascinating. First of all, because Gutenberg, the man who essentially invented the printing press, died alone and penniless. It's a complete shame. It's sad, but it's true. Most inventors die alone and penniless. I'm just going to read this to you. Gutenberg brought together several processes well known in medieval craft society to create sheets of text written with individually created metal letters. It was a process that would provide the crucial technological apparatus for an infinitely expanded production of books. But Gutenberg could not make it pay. He died bankrupt and disappointed, defeated by the complexities of a market not yet adjusted to absorb many hundreds copies of identical books. It was bracing and interesting and perverse to know that people did not trust printed books when they first came out in 1462. And it was because there were already books, and those books were manuscripts. Before the printed book, people hand-copied books. That's how books were passed down. And these hand-copied books provided the social context for how we trust information through these monks, essentially, who wrote them by hand. And when printed books came, everyone said, well, how can you trust printed books? We have all these people who've been making so many books for centuries. How can you trust this new technology? It was uncanny, actually. It was completely interesting. The flood of cheap books, De Strada argued, was corrupting morals. The printers themselves were uncultured men. The refined scribe recoiled from the thought of his beloved books now being produced by ink-stained artisans, rootless servants, and drunken foreigners. A flood of cheap books encouraged the wrong sorts of readers. This is a monk, Filippo de Strada, who was part of the infrastructure that created manuscript books. People didn't trust printed books. They thought it wasn't a good idea that many people read. And they thought that manuscript books, who held the knowledge for what they consider Western culture, had to be cultivated and protected by the few, the people who could read, sell, buy, and touch these manuscript books. And no one trusted printed books at the very beginning. Before the 16th century, the book was the preserve of the wealthy. Books, manuscripts, or print were prized objects bought for very specific purposes, as an adjunct to worship, as a scholarly resource, and as a professional handbook. It's actually not, it's honestly not that different now. There are only, as far as I can tell, there are only several genres of books that are profitable, consistently profitable. And I honestly don't think it's changed since the 15th century. But this is a much longer conversation. What am I trying to say? What I thought was fascinating about the history of book publishing was that the tension between manuscript books and printed books were the same tensions that I felt when the e-books were coming up in 2008 to 2010. That people didn't trust e-books in the same way that people didn't trust printed books when they were being printed in the 15th century, which I thought was fascinating. And I know this firsthand because in 2010, we set up our first table here at the Artist Book Fair. It was the first year of the press, and we set up. And we had a preview night, just like a preview night we had last Thursday night, right, 2010. And I wasn't here. I was in New Orleans doing something with Godot, with Kathy, actually. And Ian and someone else was at our table, and we were showing our ebooks for the first time. And if I get this wrong, Ian, tell me, okay? But these two women came up to our table, and they started arguing with each other and then with Ian and Mathieu, who was working our table. And they were basically arguing whether or not we were destroying books by making ebooks. And then she started yelling at Ian, saying, "You're destroying books by making this." And Ian, did you say anything to her? She said, "I know what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work." And I don't know what that means. I don't think you knew. Do you know what that means? Oh, and then Ian said, "It's a brave new world," and she said, "Not for all of us." And it's true. It's not for everyone. And I never thought that we were destroying books by making ebooks, but it's clear that there was resistance. And frankly, I'm resistant to it. I still read on paper books, but I know from knowing the history of book publishing now, the resistance is historical. It's not natural. The same antipathy that people have with ebooks is the same antipathy people had when printed books first came out. Completely interesting to me. Why does anyone care about this? I don't know why anyone should care about it. I care about it because I find it interesting, and apparently I have more time on my hands to read about publishing. But I think in a way, here at the Artist Book Fair, it's kind of an irrelevant question. Because really, what I'm trying to figure out is what a book is as I publish. But at the Artist Book Fair, it kind of doesn't matter. Because the question of what is a book is a stupid question. You see here that really, I don't want to quote Mao, but Mao keeps coming up. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. We can make whatever we want and call it a book, and it's cool, and it's great. At Badlands, we made a stone book, which I'll show you. That's ridiculous. I've seen ridiculous books here, and they're incredible, and I love them all. And I think it's great that it's here, the Art Book Fair here, and I hope it's here every year till the end of time. So it's great. But I am after something else, I think. The picture, by the way, is a handmade book that I made last year that you can see at the table. It's called What is a Book? I think any right artist would answer the question, what is book, with what is stupid question. But I think a particular kind of artist will answer that question by saying, what a stupid but interesting question. And so I'm going to try to describe to you what this particular kind of artist is. I think this particular kind of artist is sensitive to not only the history of the book, but the form of the book as being distinct from other mediums. I think when we as artists make things, we just make things, and we don't care what medium it is. We just make them. So if we want to make a book, we make a book. If we want to make a sculpture, we make a sculpture. It just goes. It just happens, and that's great. And in a way, I'm not medium specific. I don't know if anyone is. It's a brave new world. But on the other hand, the forms themselves have specificity to them. Some forms evoke things and ideas and notions better than others. Like, generally speaking, sculpture evokes the scale of what it means to be alive more than paintings do. Mediums evoke certain notions better than others. And a particular kind of artist may be sensitive to those forms and what they particularly evoke. And so I think a book can be a painting or a sculpture or a video performance, but it isn't. Not if you're sensitive to what a book particularly evokes. And so for this particular kind of artist, a book is a medium that uniquely manifests one particular question. And the question is summed up by Lil Wayne's great song, How to Live. The song is actually How to Love, but it's close enough. I think it's, God, it takes too long. I don't know if I want to explain this. I don't want to explain this. The form of the book, I think, evokes more than anything else our desire to learn how to live. And I think this comes from experience. I only know things from experience. I didn't grow up making artist books. I made videos. I made animation. I made everything else. My experience with a book was as a reader. And what I read was things that interested me. And what interested me can be boiled down, whether it was plays or prose or poems or philosophies, it can be boiled down to one question. How do I live? What does it mean to live? How do I live? Can someone tell me how to live? Right? I found that to be the case when I was 13, 14. I mean, when I was a teenager, I had probably the same questions that everyone else had as a teenager. Will anyone have sex with me? Why do I look so bad? Will I ever be smart? Will anyone respect me? Will I ever have a job? Can I get a better haircut? All those questions. And we naturally gravitate to the things that we think can give us the answers. Some go to poetry, some go to philosophy. I went to philosophy. I read philosophy as if they were self-help. I read philosophy as if I had to literalize what they were saying. I thought Schopenhauer was going to tell me how to live. And he wrote as if he was going to tell me how to live. So who am I to say otherwise? So I think this is embedded within the form of the book. That the form of the book is a medium that we want most to tell us how to live. That's what a book is for this particular kind of artist. Paradoxically, this kind of artist may also believe that a thing is not a thing. I don't know how to explain that. I'm just going to put that slide up there. That a thing is not only a thing, but this particular kind of artist might believe that a thing is only a thing when it is an ensemble of relations. That embedded within the very form of the thing are these relations that we hold that together create a kind of value. And the addendum is, I gotta turn around. Addendum is the more diverse and contradictory the relations, the greater the potential of the value of the thing. I know this is terribly abstract. It looks abstract. I think for me, a simple thought experiment to sort of concretize this. Think of, before I say that, and I mean by value not only economic value, not monetary value. I mean value in the very expanded sense of things that we esteem in our lives. It's kind of abstract. I think the one thought experiment that I think we could do is just think about the thing that you hold dear most, the thing that you find most valuable in your life. My guess is it's probably not the most expensive thing you own, but it's the thing that holds within the very texture, color, feel, form of it, evokes the relations that you hold dear. Because those relations that you hold dear are the things that make us who we are. And so whether it's a photo or a blanket or a sex toy or a microphone or a piece of fabric, holding it, having it means that when you have it, it evokes all those different relations, whether it's with people or with histories or with tastes or sensibilities that make you who you are or make me who I am. That's what value is. It's an ensemble of relations embedded within form. And this particular kind of artist, God, go on. And this particular kind of artist may imagine that in order to create more diverse and more contradictory relations, to create new value for what it is that you make, would have to make a framework for yourself in order to do that. And the two examples I have of that is precisely printed matter Well, let's say the first example is printed matter. Printed matter, I don't know the history of printed matter that well, but I know from talking to, is Nancy here? Nancy Princenthal? Oh, I talked to Nancy Princenthal a couple days ago, and she was telling me about how when printed matter started, the idea was to not only have a place to buy artist books, but to use it as a hub to expand where artist books ought to go, to airport bookshops, for instance, right? So the idea is to create more diverse and more contradictory relations, but on the terms of the maker, so that you don't completely get embedded within other terms that you can't control. So printed matter becomes the framework by which you create more diverse and contradictory relations. I don't publish books. I don't make really artist books until I started doing Badlands. But I know this history because the spirit of that idea was in film video. And the spirit of that idea of making a framework so that you can create more diverse and contradictory relations to create new value was embodied in the first person I talked about, Chris Marker, who had a film collective called Sloan in the 70s, which was dedicated to producing work and then providing a distribution network for the work to go elsewhere, TV, film theaters, festivals, whatever. The history of film video is full of these cooperatives and distribution systems where they tried to not only make work, but to provide the distribution system framework for that work to exist in a way so that it would tarry with other distribution forms, other worlds, other relations. TV, Experimental TV Center, Third World Newsreel, all these guys. That was my family, and I hate families. That was my aesthetic family, essentially. And so, interested, creating new, value interdependent of ever more diverse and contradictory relations. Sounds abstract, it really isn't. Badlands for me is that framework. I consider being a publisher like having a Halloween costume. No one likes this photo. I showed this to a couple people, and no one thinks it's funny. Is it the thong? What else to say about this slide? Nothing really. I'm just going to show you some examples. What I've laid out for you is a particular idea of what it means to make a book and to publish and to distribute. So I'm going to just show you some examples of what we've done that I think embody that. In 2001, Badlands published Yvonne Rainer's poems. No one knew Yvonne wrote poems until someone asked her. And I emailed her one day and said, hey, you're a prolific author. You've done essays. You've written a memoir, an incredible memoir, Feelings Are Facts. And I said, is there anything else you haven't published? And she emailed me back and said, yeah, I have poems. And after 7 months, we had a book, her first collection of poetry. And I find it thrilling that we're publishing Yvonne Rainer, and that I find it thrilling that a filmmaker and a choreographer is now a poet, who is now in conversation with other poets, having never known that she was a poet, and having never known that poets knew that she wrote poems. Her book exists as a paperback and an ebook. She didn't even know what an ebook was. I think she still doesn't know what an ebook is. That's cool. This summer, we published Petra Kortwright's ebook, Hell Tree. I don't know how to describe it. It's a sort of amalgam of all the texts that she's gathered and written on her desktop, just on her desktop. And we then reprinted it as an ebook as is. And it is, to me, evokes the precarious nature of what it means to be saturated in media in the 21st century. And it's both sort of ruthless and emotional in a way that I've never seen or felt, and which is why I was so proud to publish it as an ebook. And I'm happy to say it was the first ebook to be reviewed in Artforum in the last issue of Artforum. I think it's incredibly exciting for Badlands and for Petra. And she'll also be doing a reading Saturday at 5 here at the classroom, and I can't wait to hear her read. I'd be interested to see how she reads it. I'm not even sure how to read it, actually. I'm not sure, yeah, this was one of those books where we didn't need a copy editor, basically. But this book exists only as an ebook because it doesn't make sense to have it as a paper book. The form doesn't demand a paper form. The form demands that it becomes only for this illuminated screen, right? Our fall book this year is On Democracy by Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein wrote 3 speeches on the subject of democracy in the 70s. Hilarious. I've been sitting on these speeches for years, and frankly, I wanted to publish it a long time ago, but I didn't have enough lawyers. And finally, I had enough lawyers, so we published them. And I think this exemplifies for me the expansion of the diverse and contradictory relations necessary for something to create new value. They are perverse. And frankly, they sound a lot like Mitt Romney, which is why we made a sign connecting Mitt Romney to Saddam Hussein at our table at Badlands. It's got great writers in it. Nagar Azimi's here. Is Nagar here? Where's Nagar? Is she here? I don't know. Oh, there she's back there. She's in the book. Nicholas Calabrese's in the book. I made some artwork for it. We don't know how to sell it, but we don't care because it's worth doing because it's fucking insane. And I love it. And it exists as an ebook and as a paperback book. This fall, we also published Bernadette Corporation's Made in USA. Bernadette Corporation, as you may or may not know, has a great show at Artist Space right now that runs through December of like 2017 or something. It's so long. But they, in 1999-2000, they published 3 great experimental magazines that combine art, fashion, critique, and cultural critique. And they've been out of print for years, and we publish them as high-res ebooks, so you can buy them on Apple and Amazon. And I think no one exemplifies the kind of contradictory nature of these relations more than Bernadette Corporation, at least in the 2000s. So we were very happy to publish these, to sort of continue the program of what we're trying to do with Badlands. This fall, we published Our Best Ideas Come from Lunch. We publish on Mondays and Tuesdays, me, Mika, and Ian, and whoever else is working. And at lunch, we sit around thinking, well, what else should we publish? And one day we thought, well, our motto is books in an expanded field, so what does that really mean? And we thought, well, we should publish on stone, because God did it. Whoever wrote Gilgamesh did it, why can't we? So 7 months later, we published our first book on stone. It's called Holiday. It's got 2 pages. It's got a copyright page and then the story. And it exists as an edition of 1 and an unlimited ebook on Apple and Amazon. I realized just today, gathering the slides, that it's interesting that I never made the connection that I made this book called Holiday, and I started the press when I wasn't working. It never occurred to me that I was taking a holiday and that I was manifesting that holiday in this stone book. It never occurred to me. Anyways, that's at the table too. We don't have a tote bag for this if anyone wants to buy it. The last thing I want to leave you is something that I think also exemplifies what we're trying to do with Badlands and with the idea of these diverse and contradictory relations. In 2013, we're going to publish a book by Calvin Tompkins, the New Yorker, the great New Yorker writer and profilist of artists. Calvin Tompkins, in 1964, Calvin Tompkins interviewed Marcel Duchamp for a number of afternoons. Those interviews became the basis for his profile in the New Yorker in '65, and then his great biography that was published in 1996, 1992, I'm not sure. But those interviews as raw material has never been edited and made public. And so Badlands is bringing them out. And I think what I'd like to think that it reintroduces Duchamp for a new generation of people, and to sort of soften the image of Duchamp that's been sort of let's say embedded within a kind of scholarship that may be academic to the point of being Byzantine. I think Duchamp is a very moving artist and a very contradictory artist, and an artist very much within the idea of what it means how to live. It was interesting that Calvin and I talked about Duchamp, and one name came up, a writer named Montaigne. And Calvin sees Duchamp as a Montaigne-like figure, trying to figure out how to live through the works that he was doing. So it wasn't necessarily about the cryptic codes that he put in, but it was about what it means for him to survive the times and endure as an artist while making stuff that he himself is interested in doing. And so we're publishing that as a paper book and an ebook. And just to fuck it up a little more, at the Badlands table, I've made a zine. In the afternoon interviews, the introduction is me interviewing Tad about his remembrances of Duchamp. And Tad and I collaborated then on making a zine, publishing that introductory interview between me and Tad as a limited and hand-drawn zine. And we slapped an ISBN number on it and called it a day. And so that's at our table. This is our table at Badlands. I don't know. I hope I said something interesting. I hope I said something that maybe you'll think about. And I want to say thanks for coming, and thanks for being here, and thank you. I don't know if is there a Q&A? Do people want a Q&A? I don't care. Are there questions? Do we have a time thing? Anyone have whiskey? No questions. Perfect. Okay, have a great night, you guys.